may be poor, but I am somebody. I may be on welfare, but I am somebody. I may be in jail, but I am somebody. I may be uneducated, but I am somebody. I am black, beautiful, proud. I must be respected. I must be protected. I am somebody. Right on.
Morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Dr. Soul Brother back at you again. It's good to be back, and a lot has happened, but uh, what can I say? Had some health challenges, but by God's grace, I'm back. Um, we want to pay proper homage to one of our giants we lost recently, and that is Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr. I think it's important for us to, especially us as Black folk, uh, in general, but the country at large, but mostly us, pay proper homage to a man who did a lot for our community. People can say what they want to, but the fact of the matter is, Reverend Jesse Jackson put in work. He put in work. And folks want to try to clown him, disrespect him, frankly, but we're not going to have that, not on this platform. This is important to know and understand. He was a mentee, pardon me, of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Okay, and similar to Dr. King, he was unapologetically Black. In fact, I'll say this here: in many ways, uh, Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. he was like, how can I say? He served as a bridge between civil rights and Black power. Let me repeat that. He served as a bridge between civil rights and Black power. He was in the civil rights movement by the mid '60s, and you look how he was looking. You saw he was clean cut and all that, suit and tie. But by the late '60s, going into the early '70s, that started to change. He got away from the necktie. He got away. He started wearing a turtleneck with a blazer. Then by the '70s, he had a blown out natural and would be wearing a dashiki, those kind of things. Now, this is a man who never changed his name. He was still Jesse Lewis Jackson until he left this earth on February 17th, 2026. And by the way, it's not lost on me that he passed away on the birthday of Huey P. Newton, co-founder of the Black Panther Party. But that's conversation for another day. Getting back to Reverend Jesse Jackson, this is a man who came from very humble beginnings in South Carolina, a very poor community there in Greenville, South Carolina. Um, and his story is fascinating to me in a lot of ways. First of all, here's a guy who was born out of wedlock. His parents were not married. His mother was 16 when she had him. And in those days, he was born 1941, October 8th, 1941. And in those days, it was a lot different from today, where, there was a negative stigma as it related to being born out of wedlock or even being pregnant out of wedlock. See? And so, and not to mention, he grew up in the Jim Crow South. But while that was happening, while those kind of negative things were happening with him, he had a social infrastructure. And if you've ever watched it was a program with Henry Louis Gates. And the name of the documentary is escaping me right now, but If somebody could help me with that. Yeah, I can't remember. But anyway, on camera, Reverend Jesse Jackson talked about a social infrastructure in the community. That was very important. And that was something that we had uh, during his era. And I'm going to say this, yes, this was happening during um, the segregated period, but let's be clear, because that was happening in the segregated period, don't get it twisted. That doesn't mean that uh, segregation was good for us, because it was not. Because again, um, when it came to segregation, it came with the, as Dr. King eloquently pointed out, um, how did he say? Whenever you segregate against a community, you inevitably discriminate against that community. So we need to be clear that there's nothing positive about that. But let me move on. Here's a man who got a chance to get a football scholarship, I believe, at the University of Illinois back in 1959. He ran into some racism on the campus there. Now, mind you, this is Illinois. This is the North, not the South, where he was from. Of course, growing up in the segregated South, of course, he ran into racism. But the point is, um, things are such that he was not able to complete his studies there. So what ended up happening? He left and ended up at North Carolina A&T in the state of North Carolina, his neighbor state, and was able to get in. And he played football. I believe he was quarterback. I believe somebody help me what position Jesse Jackson played, but nevertheless, this is where he met his wife. This is also where he played Omega Psi Phi. Let me explain a few things here very quickly. Um, Here's a guy who was, again, grew up in the rural South during Jim Crow era. He was raised in the Black church tradition, the Black church tradition. That's what he was raised in. And so, many ways, Reverend Jackson was the embodiment of all of those things that came from the Black experience in these United States. So, and he managed to beat the odds. He wasn't supposed to make it. And given the circumstances and the environment in which he came from, he wasn't supposed to succeed. But because of the social infrastructure that he had in that community, he was able to succeed. And of course, um, he grew up going to church. Of course, things were a lot different back then as it relates to the church, but I won't get off into that too deep. But he, again, he had a school, uh, schools that he attended K through 12, and some of those same people attended the same church that he attended. And he was gifted not just as it relates to sports, but he had great intellect. And we saw that when he engaged in debates with people. Okay. And let's be clear. Um, our schools, be they the high schools that we attended in the South and or the HBCUs, prepared you for those things. And the teachers that he had um, growing up, and if you talk to anybody who grew up during the era in which he grew up, they had similar stories. I know when I went to an HBCU, I had professors who talked about them their experiences growing up in the South and how um, they were taught by their teachers. So let's be clear. Um, that was very important, very very important. But Jesse Jackson, while at North Carolina A&T, played football, played Omega Psi Phi. He was a Omega to the end. Pardon me, to the end. And you look at his profile. He was Baptist. He was a proud member of Omega Psi Phi, which is part of the Divine Nine. What else? He dug soul music, like Dr. King. He dug soul music and he dug soul food. Matter of fact, it's my understanding that Reverend Jackson would enjoy Church's chicken. I personally prefer Kentucky Fried Chicken, but hey, whatever floats your boat. The point is that he was a down home brother. In fact, he was referred to. No, I was about to say he was referred to, but he referred to himself as a country preacher. He was a country preacher, and he was unapologetic as it related to his blackness. He didn't try to uh, speak differently. I mean, what you heard, what you see is what you got. And matter of fact, there is a book, a very good book. I would encourage everybody to get their hands on called Jesse, The Life and Pilgrimage of Jesse Jackson by Marshall Frady, a white man who was a native of South Carolina himself. He was a journalist for many years. He's since passed on. In fact, Reverend Jackson eulogized him. So that informs me, pardon me, that this book would be worth reading. And it was, and it is. And there's a part in here where he says, Frady that is, says, for whatever reason, Jackson has never undertaken to quote unquote whiten his enunciation into the reassuringly colorless precisions of other Black figures. His voice still holds the thick crocker sack textures, the juke rock churns of the Pooh Hall street corner, and muddy alleyways of his organs. You see, your background, the way you speak, etc., speaks volumes about you as a person. Okay. For example, somebody hearing me right now can tell that I'm an urbanite. You know, obviously, this is a Black man talking to you. Okay, by my accent. Okay, and that's something that I take pride in, and I don't apologize for. And so, Jesse Jackson, on the other hand, not only was he Southern, but he was, as he said, a country boy. So he wore that on his sleeve. He wore that proudly. And so, as I said, he didn't try to um, whiten his accent and try to come off talking nasal and all that kind of craziness. I said, what you saw, it was like what you see is what you get. You either take me as I am or you don't take me at all. So that was another part of his being unapologetically Black. Um, Not to mention, I said back in the day when he had a big blown out natural, um, and and all of that, he's basking in his Blackness, and yet he did not try to several things. He didn't break from his religion, and not only that, he didn't try to change his name. And what else? He didn't change his diet. He still ate soul food. He was a soul brother. Period. Okay. So, and even though, mind you, he had he was international outlook. He had traveled to Africa. He had traveled to other parts of the world, and he embraced those things. He embraced being of African descent. I mean, he's the one who pushed the term African American, which brings me to something. Some of y'all on here on social media want to attack Jesse Jackson as it relates to African American, which he pushed in the late '80s. Well, guess what? Let me hip you all to something. There's no difference between Afro American and Afro American. So if you're going to criticize the term African American, you might as well criticize um, uh, Malcolm X. Because even though Malcolm X did not coin the term Afro American, he certainly pushed it and he embraced it. And not only that, he labeled uh, his second organization. Remember, there were two organizations he created after he broke away from the Nation of Islam. One was the Muslim Mosque Incorporated, and the other one was a secular one called Organization of Afro American Unity, modeled after the Organization of African Unity. Okay, let's be clear on this. So the thing is this. Um, I don't like how some of y'all have come on here and want to attack because you've been doing this for a while. It's gotten really old, and I'm personally sick of it. And you're going to get to the point where, well, Jesse Jackson, he caused this and caused. Well, he was in that tradition. Again, there's no difference between Afro American and African American. So if you're going to criticize him with that, you might as well criticize Malcolm X, and you might as well criticize um, Mrs. Ida B. Wells, because Mrs. Ida B. Wells embraced Afro American. Okay, I'll tell you somebody else who embraced Afro American. Huey Newton and Bobby Seale. Remember now, before they founded the um, Black Panther Party for self-defense, as young college students in the early '60s, they were part of the what was it, the Afro American Association there in the Bay Area. Okay, so um, we need to get off that tip with that. Really, we need to get off that tip. And so because see, when you do that, you're not only disrespecting Jesse Jackson, but you're disrespecting your ancestors who embraced Afro American. But let me move on. Get back to the topic at hand, and that is Reverend Jesse Jackson. Reverend Jesse Jackson put in work. He was involved in the South African anti-apartheid movement as it relates to South Africa. He was big on that, and he went to jail. So um, that really helped to heighten the level of social awareness, the anti-apartheid movement that he was involved in. In fact, I would also encourage many of y'all to watch the debate that took place on Nightline with Ted Koppel. Watch it where Jesse Jackson debates then Reverend Jerry Falwell, a white Southern man who uh, couldn't hold a candle to Reverend Jesse Jackson as it related to debate or intellect, frankly. He could not. In fact, a lot of y'all who like Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, if you get a copy of a recording at Compton City College in California, 1985, Dr. Welsing paid homage to Jesse Jackson. And what did she say? Look at Jesse Jackson. Fastest mind in the West. Okay? He was the man back then. He was. And he continued to do things. And so even though he broke away from wearing the Afro hairstyle and broke away from the sporting of the dashiki, again, he still embraced his blackness. And I'll be frank with you. I embrace my blackness similar to Dr. King and Jesse Jackson, and of course Malcolm X. But I'm talking about Jesse Jackson and Martin Luther King in particular because those two were both Christian ministers, and they were in the tradition of the Black church and this overall Black culture at large. That's who they represent. So, in many ways, um, Jesse Jackson uh, continued where Dr. King left off to some degree, to some degree. Not in everything, but to some degree, he did that. Okay. So this is something that needs to be embraced. Uh, did Jesse Jackson have flaws? Of course. What human being doesn't? But guess what? You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And the fact of the matter is, truth be told, there were people who did not like Jesse Jackson. They resented the fact, white folks that is, resented the fact that he was running for the presidency both times. Now, when I say white folks, I'm not talking about all of them. I know that you had a segment of what they call progressive whites who were in his corner and standing shoulder to shoulder with him. But I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about those who could not stand to see I mean, think about this: the audacity in their mind for this Negro to consider, not just consider, but jump into the um, political ring and say, "Yes, I accept the nomination for the presidency of the United States." What? Oh man, that took some. It takes some jewels, if you get my drift, to do that. And in many ways, Jesse Jackson opened the gate for a Barack Obama and by further extension, a Kamala Harris. Yeah, I said that. Okay, that's real. All one has to do, you don't have to take Dr. Soul Brother's word for it. Just go back and do your homework and then bring it back up to the present, and you will see what I'm talking about. But again, I didn't want to take a whole lot of time. I thought it was important to hop on here and do a show, pay homage to, and I'm not done yet. I'm doing this today, but there'll be other shows paying homage. I would encourage everybody to, um, assuming that we'll see Reverend Jackson's service on TV, is to watch that, share that with your children. Let your children know about who Reverend Jackson was, what he was about, the kind of work. I mean, again, when I say this man put in work, I can't even begin to start. I mean, it's like where do you start? I mean, there's so much like I said I mean, he did a lot. He did a lot. Not to mention that brother there, Lieutenant Goodman. He managed to rescue him. That's a story. If you go down the list, there's all kind of each one is like a standalone when it comes to uh, Reverend Jesse Jackson. It really is. But one of my things, uh, as I see it, and I would love for folks to chime in. In fact, I'm this is my request. If anybody knows how I can uh, have it where, let's say I do a live stream and people call in, hop on and want to talk to Dr. Soul Brother and go through this, I would love to engage, just as long as you don't cross the line and get disrespectful on my channel. But um, I would love for people to hop on, express themselves about Jesse Jackson or other things. Don't have to necessarily be about him, but him and other topics that we discuss on this channel. But it's important for people to know who he was, who he really was, the kind of work he put in, and try to pick up the mantle. Somebody needs to pick up that mantle. And at 84 years old, he put in his time. He put in his time. So for somebody like Reverend Jesse Jackson, we salute you. We appreciate you. You'll be missed. But while you were on this earth, you were doing God's work, not the devil's work. Okay? So I'm going to end things with this thing because this is one of my favorites. In many ways, it ties in with the whole thing with uh, I'm black and I'm proud in a lot of ways. And if there's anybody who was around back in the day when he was saying what he was saying and encouraging people to hold your head up high, stick your chest out, and all those kind of things, that's very important. So I'm going to end it with this. And until the next time, God bless.
I may be poor, but I am somebody. I may be on welfare, but I am somebody. I may be in jail, but I am somebody. I may be uneducated, but I am somebody. I am black, beautiful, proud. I must be respected. I must be protected.